December 11th, 1979. A hot South African night pressed down on the walls of Pretoria Central Prison. Inside, everything looked normal. Guards moved through the corridors, steel doors stood locked. The prison slept beneath a blanket of silence. But in one cell, 3 men were still awake. They spoke in whispers so soft, even the walls could barely hear them. For months, they had been building toward this moment. Every risk, every failure, every stolen second had led to one final attempt. Tonight, they would try to do the impossible. They would break out of one of the most secure prisons in South Africa. And if they failed, they would lose far more than their freedom. Scene 1. A country built on fear. To understand what happened that night, you have to go back. Back before 1979. Back into the darkest machinery of apartheid South Africa. This was not just discrimination, it was a system. A brutal order designed to divide human beings by race and turn power into a weapon. White rulers controlled the land, the schools, the hospitals, the laws, the future. Black South Africans were denied dignity, denied rights, denied even the basic freedom to live as equal citizens in their own country. It was a world where injustice had been organized into policy. And yet, like every cruel system in history, it created its own resistance. Scene 2. The men who chose to resist. One of those men was Tim Jenkin. Born white in Cape Town, Tim had grown up in a world that told him apartheid was normal, necessary, even good. But the further he traveled, the more cracks he began to see. In Europe, he read foreign newspapers that condemned South Africa. He encountered exiles, activists, and survivors of the regime. He began asking questions he had never asked before. And once he started digging into the truth, there was no going back. In London, Tim met another South African exile, Stephen Lee. They were both white, both South African, and both disgusted by the system their country had built. Thinking was no longer enough. Criticism was no longer enough. If they were going to stand against apartheid, they had to act. So they joined the underground struggle linked to the African National Congress. Their mission was dangerous, but simple on the surface. Return to South Africa and spread the message that resistance was still alive. Scene 3. The leaflet bombs. At that time, propaganda was power. The government controlled the narrative. Opposition groups were banned. Many people believed the resistance had already been crushed. Tim and Stephen were sent back into South Africa to change that. They created thousands of political leaflets, messages of defiance, hope, and resistance. But handing them out openly would have meant immediate arrest. So they invented something clever, a device later described as a kind of leaflet bomb. No explosives, no flames, just timing, mechanics, and precision. Leaflets were packed inside containers rigged to burst open at the right moment. When the timer triggered, pages exploded into the air, raining down over public places. In an instant, the streets were flooded with forbidden words. The message was clear. The struggle was not over. And the government noticed. Scene 4. The arrest. The more successful they became, the more danger closed in. Phones were watched, letters were opened. Suspicious faces began appearing in familiar places. Tim and Stephen knew the net was tightening. Still, they kept going. Then, in the early hours of March 2, 1978, the chase ended. Police moved in. The 2 men were arrested. They were separated, interrogated, pressured to reveal names, networks, secrets. The state wanted more than a confession. It wanted the entire underground. But Tim and Stephen gave them little. The evidence, however, was enough. The trial was a formality. The sentence was already waiting. Tim Jenkin, 12 years. Stephen Lee, 8 years. And then came the destination that terrified even hardened criminals. Pretoria Central Prison. Scene 5. The prison. Pretoria was more than a prison. It was a warning. A place built not just to contain bodies, but to crush conviction. Political prisoners were kept under relentless surveillance. Doors were locked and relocked. Rules were strict. Movement was controlled. Isolation was deliberate. Every corridor was part of a system. Every lock, every gate, every procedure was designed to say the same thing: you are never getting out. Tim was placed in a tiny cell with almost no light, heavy walls, narrow windows, no freedom, no horizon. And somewhere in that darkness, he made a decision. He would not spend 12 years here. He would escape. Scene 6. Studying the machine. Most prisoners saw the prison as a tomb. Tim saw it as a machine. And every machine, no matter how powerful, has weaknesses. He began to observe everything. Which guards were careless, which ones were alert, who drank tea at certain times, who walked slowly, who got tired, when the corridors were quiet, when footsteps echoed, when attention drifted. He studied the place the way an engineer studies a device. Then his attention settled on the most important part of all, the locks. There were locks everywhere: cell doors, corridor doors, administrative barriers, access points leading closer and closer to the outside world. The prison trusted those locks. Tim decided to break that trust. Scene 7. Wooden keys. There was one problem. He had no metal, no real key, no blueprint. So he improvised. Using whatever he could observe, whatever shapes he could memorize, and whatever scraps he could secretly shape, Tim began crafting keys out of wood. At first, nothing worked. The first attempt failed, then the second, then the third. Each failure brought a new clue, a slightly different angle, a deeper notch, a sharper cut. Slowly, the wooden keys improved. Eventually, Stephen Lee joined the effort. Then, a third political prisoner became part of the plan: Alex Moumbaris. Now there were 3 men, 3 minds, one impossible route to freedom. Scene 8. The plan. Their escape would depend on silence, timing, and nerve. First, open the cell doors. Then move through the intersections. Then unlock one secured doorway after another. Then reach the administrative side. Then find a way through the final barrier to the outside. Every stage could fail. Every click of metal could expose them. Every shadow could become a guard. And if a single lock refused to turn, it was over. But after months of trial and error, more and more locks began to yield. The impossible was starting to look possible. Scene 9. The night of the escape. Then came the night. December 11th, 1979. The prison was quiet. Too quiet. Tim reached for the hidden wooden keys. His hands trembled. Not because he doubted the plan, but because now, after all those months, there was no more room for theory. Only action. He slid the first key into the lock. Nothing. His breathing sharpened. He adjusted. Tried again. Click. The first door opened. A tiny sound. A massive victory. He slipped out. Stephen and Alex were ready. Together, the 3 men began moving through the prison like ghosts. At each door, another test, another pause, another heartbeat pounding against the silence. A guard's footsteps suddenly approached. Closer. Closer. The men froze. No movement, no breath, no sound. The footsteps passed. The danger faded. They moved again. Door after door opened. Some guards were distracted, some careless, some exhausted, and some were simply looking the wrong way at the worst possible time. The prison's confidence was collapsing one lock at a time. Scene 10. The final barrier. Then they reached the last obstacle, the main exit. If this failed, everything failed. The final door did not yield easily, but they had prepared for that too. With tools they had secretly arranged, they forced the mechanism and worked through the last resistance. And then, the door opened. Not over the wall, not through a tunnel, not by brute force. They walked out through the front, straight through the heart of the prison. Before disappearing into the night, they changed into ordinary clothes. No prison uniforms, no obvious signs. Just 3 men stepping into darkness and into freedom. But the race was far from over, because once the prison discovered the escape, South Africa would come alive hunting them. Scene 11. The Hunt. By morning, the shock inside Pretoria Central was total. Cells were checked, registers examined, doors inspected. At first, the authorities could barely believe it. How could prisoners vanish from a place built to be unbreakable? And when they looked closer, the truth became even worse. The doors had not been smashed. They had been opened properly. That meant planning. That meant intelligence. That meant humiliation. Alarms rang, searches began, police mobilized. But by then, Tim, Stephen, and Alex were already moving. They used safe contacts, underground allies, hidden support networks, a car, a little money, a route out. Roadblocks spread across highways, so they avoided the obvious roads and pushed through rougher paths. Their goal was simple: get out of South Africa before the net closes again. Scene 12. Beyond the border. The journey out was a desperate chain of escapes after the escape. They crossed borders, changed routes, used secret assistance, stayed ahead of pursuit. Even outside South Africa, danger followed them. Intelligence agents were still active. Extradition was a threat. One mistake at a checkpoint could have ended everything. But somehow, against every probability, they kept moving. Mozambique, then onward through a hidden network. New identities, false documents, flights, transit points, constant risk. Until at last, in the early days of 1980, they arrived in London. Safe, alive, free. Scene 13. The Reveal. In London, the world finally saw what had happened. Tim revealed the wooden keys. Simple, hand-shaped, almost absurd in their modesty. And yet, those pieces of carved wood had defeated one of the most secure prison systems in South Africa. The story exploded. The regime was embarrassed, its image damaged, its prison security exposed. Tim did not disappear into anonymity. He returned to anti-apartheid work, helping the movement in new ways, even building secure communication methods to help underground activists operate more safely. The escape had not ended the struggle. It had transformed it. Reflective, powerful. 3 prisoners, 10 locked doors, 1 machine built to break human beings. And yet, the system failed. Not because it was weak, but because determination can turn patience into a weapon and imagination into a key. On that December night in Pretoria, freedom did not arrive with an explosion. It arrived with whispers, with nerve, with carved wood, with a single sound in the dark. Click. And then, history changed. For more true stories packed with suspense, mystery, and cinematic twists, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon right now.